Hello there, Commonwealth from here, and with a new generation, new hopes for a much more powerful and better looking The Next Legend of Zelda game. The Nintendo Switch 2, based on even its handheld power, that is to say without the extra cooling in the dock and so on, is more powerful than the PlayStation 4. And some will say that's like 10-year-old hardware and so on. Yeah, but I think a lot of people tend to forget what kind of games we had on the PlayStation 4. Visuals, the Next Zelda can take inspiration from, but also what Nintendo likes to do, namely go their own path when it comes to art styles and also finding a good blend of gameplay versus graphics. We all know gameplay takes their priority even compared to story, which used to be a heavy emphasis on The Legend of Zelda in the past. But yes, Geeker 1, the big specs leak that happened not so long ago, was able to simulate the Switch 2 based on the motherboard and the T239 system on chip compared to other systems. Most of the results we have been seeing is that the Switch 2 is in handheld, so the basic format, so up to 1080p, above PlayStation 4. And when it comes to its docked gameplay, and that's before DLSS, it's a little bit weaker than an Xbox Series S, but the DLSS will be able to mitigate some of that difference. If there's one thing that the Switch was, it was an underpowered system. And that's why we saw all of those sacrifices being made from a visual perspective and also performance-wise. Now we know that Nintendo Switch 2 is much more powerful. We're not seeing any more problems with frame rates like we saw in the case of Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom in certain areas, and also Age of Calamity. Age of Imprisonment seems to be running in steady, fluid 60 frames per second. We don't know the full resolutions yet. Yes, the trailers have been in 4K, and it's not an open world game, of course, so there are possibilities, as we see with Metroid Prime 4 Beyond as well, but I have a feeling that we should be a little bit more realistic and see that maybe if we want the more realistic art styles, the more graphic intensive art styles, the next Zelda not being maybe in 4K, but still being very impressive. But that isn't really a problem when you think about it, because the games that were coming out alongside the Zelda games of the Nintendo Switch were the likes of Skyrim, which was also of course on the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. It was the likes of Dragon's Dogma, same case. And of course, when it came to games that went above and beyond, like The Witcher 3 Complete Edition, a lot of sacrifices were made to bring them down from, say, the PS4 or Xbox One versions. But this will no longer be the case anymore on the Nintendo Switch 2. And as a result, we know Nintendo is far better at optimizing. Like, Tears of the Kingdom is one of the best looking Switch games out there, along with the Xenoblade games. We should be expecting higher graphics. How much higher? I think we can look at games like, the modern era Assassin's Creed games like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Origins, to see how detailed a future Zelda game could be. If there's ever been a time to get back to the, Zelda HD project that we saw in 2011, which was never fully realized, and of course the equivalent of the Space World 2000, it's possible that this could be the generation to go back for a more realistic Zelda art style, one that can rival the likes of, Red Dead Redemption 2, which also was on the PlayStation 4. In fact, I played Red Dead Redemption 2 launch day on the PlayStation 4. It was 2018. We still didn't have the power of the PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series. And seeing that this is more powerful than that, handheld, maybe not than the PS4 Pro handheld, but definitely docked, it shows the capabilities, it shows the true potential of this system and the next Legend of Zelda game. And I think when they finished Tears of the Kingdom and saw the power of the Nintendo Switch 2 and the Tegra T239 chip, I think the Zelda team really have been thinking, okay, we can make something truly special here. But the problem is that they can go in two different directions with this. Number one is, of course, going the whole graphical route, trying to make a game that can look as stunning as, say, Assassin's Creed Odyssey or Red Dead Redemption 2, which would be absolutely mind-blowing. But as we have seen from different games like, Mario Kart World, which is also open world, and the open area Donkey Kong Bonanza, you can also add some more interactive elements. Destructible environments, which is something that I think the Zelda team would maybe like to take advantage of when one thinks about it, because they like to experiment. We saw that with the Ultra Hand, with Auto Build, especially now with Auto Build Share through Zelda Notes years as well, it will be more and more feasible to add these kind of elements while also upping up the graphics, of course. But at the same time, if we look at the fact that the games that we are referencing are in all regard not PlayStation 5 generation games, that's the same goes with The Witcher 3, by the way, because of course in 2015 we didn't even have the PlayStation Pro, and it worked very well. Of course, it wasn't comparable to PC, but then again, this is the console experience. Yes, some games might be problematic. Like Geeker1 was pointing out that Black Myth Wukong would have big problems running on the Nintendo Switch 2. And Monster Hunter Wilds is probably gonna be in deep trouble if they want to run on the Nintendo Switch 2. Of course, ports are possible to happen. We've seen impossible ports already. And that is the big potential of the next Zelda as well, is that one thing I don't think everyone here is really aware of is just how much of a jump it is from the Nintendo Switch to the Nintendo Switch 2. When you have games like Cyberpunk running in pretty good visuals, we know full well that the next Zelda game has the potential of finally doing something that Nintendo hasn't done in a very long time. Namely, don't do sacrifices in its visual fidelity, in its performance fidelity. But of course, it will all come down to balancing. We know that 60 frames per second is the new aim on this system, and making games run in 4K 60 would be a dream, of course. But I think a lot of us also agree that the map, especially the total area of Tears of the Kingdom, was too big. So by scaling that down and also adding all of the, faster load times, much more powerful hardware, you can create an experience that is in many ways well-rounded. Having a performance mode, having a graphical mode, which is something that I think that the Zelda team is clearly aware of and using to the fullest potential. And I don't want to come out and say that, oh yeah, this game is going to look like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but at the same time, I don't see why it wouldn't, because we have a more powerful system than that game was built for. And why wouldn't you want Zelda games to look as stunning as this? Maybe add a little bit more, anime-esque style, like we saw in the 2011 tech demo or Zelda HD Experience. But it just shows that the future of Zelda on this system is far more exciting than any one of us can possibly imagine. I think graphics are something we're sleeping on. It's because we don't think it's that important for Zelda, but on this system, oh, it definitely is. And it will be an example of a showcase where Nintendo can show that we are not only making these more similar to Switch artistically looking games, we are also capable of delivering these more realistic, gritty, and what's more powerful looking games. And when it comes to first party building from scratch, I think that the next Zelda game is the perfect example of that, because Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, yes, is realistic looking, but at the same time it was primarily developed for the Nintendo Switch. And as a result, it's not gonna be the benchmark that this system is capable of, especially since you have a version also on the Nintendo Switch. This game is gonna be exclusive to the Nintendo Switch 2, meaning that we should be expecting stuff like Red Dead Redemption 2, like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and like Elden Ring most of all. Elden Ring, of course, came out on the PlayStation 5, but it's now on the Nintendo Switch 2, and if that game can run so well with its open world, why wouldn't a more realistic open-air Zelda be able to do the same? Zelda has potential of looking far better, run better, and provide even more within a little bit smaller open world. And there are more games like that as well that we can bring up, like Ghost of Tsushima, for example, which runs surprisingly well on the PlayStation 4 as well. I think that we should, in many ways, gear up our expectations for the graphics of the next Legend of Zelda game, thanks to these great specs that the Nintendo Switch 2 is providing. Yeah, it might not be on the level of PlayStation 5, but with DLSS, it's very close to Xbox Series S. And seeing what kind of games are coming to this system, including GTA 6, I have a feeling that we'll be blown away when we see the difference and jump from The Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom, even the Switch 2 editions, to that next Zelda game. And if that reveal is happening next year, you know that this will take the world by storm. But yes, that is my take on first the specs leaks and the impact they can have on The Legend of Zelda. But what do you hope the next Zelda game will be from a visual and graphical perspective? Do you hope for more, destructible environments like in the case of Donkey Kong Bonanza, but at the sacrifice of graphical detail and maybe art style as well? Or do you just want them to create something similar to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but with, you know, a more next-gen graphical fidelity, but also running in 60 frames per second and being 1440p, and then in 4K at 30 frames per second. Sound off in the comment section down below. If you haven't already, then be sure to leave a like, subscribe and press the notification bell, not miss any upcoming Nintendo Switch 2, Zelda, and much more Nintendo videos. Last but not least, a big thanks to all of you for watching to the end, and to all our patreon.com/commonrealm patrons. Special shoutouts go to Raw Producer, JC Funk, and Heroes, Cheryl, Garrett Hoy, Holly Wolf, and Kintaro. You all rock, and please enjoy one or both of these two awesome videos.